Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So this is session 1 of Sutta Studies, Wat Buddha Dhamma, Rains Retreat 2021. And it was suggested by a couple of people that I should, one theme that I could go through was the book I've been putting together for the last 5 years. Well, it's fresh in my mind. And since it does cover quite a few of the key aspects of the Buddha's teachings, there should be enough material to stretch out for 10 talks. If not, I have to diverge a bit to other themes, but it depends on the detail, I guess, really. But there's a lot of material in this book I'm putting together. It didn't start off that way. I guess I should say in general, it is a study of the Buddha's teaching on anatta, no permanent self, which is probably the most profound aspect of the Buddha's teachings, but also the most misunderstood also. So I come across these confusions a lot, or I did when I traveled. People were pretty confused about it. And it is a very key aspect of the Buddha's teachings. I mean, that's, you can say, one of the unique aspects of the Buddha's teachings. Probably something like maybe 3/4 of the Buddha's teachings is basic religion. You know, moral teachings, generosity, kindness, what else? What's basic moral teaching? Haven't been to church for a while. But mostly about morality, being a good person, and keeping the precepts. And then maybe there's another, maybe 20% or so. You know, that's about meditation practice for those who are interested, mental development, developing not just morality, but meditation, such as meditation qualities such as mindfulness, concentration, energy. If you remember the Eightfold Path, you know, there's morality, meditation, wisdom. So the last 10% maybe is the wisdom part, because really to develop the Buddha wisdom, one needs quite a good foundation in say, morality and meditation to really understand it. So this book I'm putting together is an initial attempt to try to answer this, or give some solutions to the confusion around the teachings on anatta, no permanent self. And specifically, it's an investigation of one particular phrase in the Pali Canon, which I came across, sort of an enigmatic, cryptic phrase, which was very, very intriguing because it was, you know, a little bit unusual, and it was cryptic because there was no explanation of it. So it took a bit of. So I thought I should investigate this. What does this mean? And should I give you the phrase? Keep you on tenterhooks for a while. 2 or about three talks, and then come back for the encore. So this phrase, if I my translation is, this is the I-making, mine-making, and the underlying disposition to conceit. And where it comes up, initially anyway, is that various monks, various bhikkhus go to ask the Buddha, how does one know? Here, I'll read it out actually. I had to make sure I got it right here. This phrase occurs 25 times in the Pali Canon, so it's not so difficult to trace it down. But most of the times it occurs is very repetitive. So there's actually only 7 times where there's a unique presentation of it, very unique way the Buddha. So this person asked about it, and only four answers the Buddha gives. 4 unique answers the Buddha gives. So anyway, the stories go, the 25 stories basically. These monks come to the Buddha and they ask, Venerable, how should one know? How should one see? So that in regard to this body with consciousness, body-mind, and all external signs, that means things outside too, that I-making, mine-making, and the underlying disposition to conceit no longer exist or have been uprooted. There's a few other little adaptations of it, but basically that's it. A few times, rather than the whole phrase, I-making, mine-making, and the underlying disposition to conceit, it just says I-making, mine-making, and conceit, which is about the same thing. Huh? But this underlying disposition to conceit, this is my translation of the Pali word Anusayah, which is not very familiar to most people probably. And so you're rushing off to the library and looking at the Buddhist dictionary. And for those who were familiar with Bhikkhu Bodhi's translations, he translates Anusayah as underlying tendency. So it is a very fundamental underlying disposition that we're born with. We're all born with a tendency. It's even pre-conscious. We're born with this tendency, this disposition to conceit. Always think in terms of I, myself. It's very, very rudimentary in kind of, about basic psychological development. The beginning of I is very, very almost instinctual. The young child, when it's first born, has no sense of I, never has no sense of self. Then it begins to differentiate. If I scream, my mother feeds me. And then it begins to slowly develop, but I'll come to that later. But anyway, this phrase, I found it very intriguing because already, to me anyway, it signifies the Buddha's very fundamental approach the Buddha had to the nature of self. We hear about this teaching of anatta, which is usually translated as no self or non-self, which is a literal translation, but it can be misunderstood very easily because basically we have a self, right? It's kind of what do you call it? Counterintuitive. Huh? It's really counterintuitive. I want to hear that bell over there, not that one. That was a nice one over there. But it's stopped now, huh? Anyway, sort of a counterintuitive. If you just hear this kind of basic teaching, anatta, in the 3 characteristics, impermanence, anicca, dukkha, anatta. And so that's a very, very succinct summary of, a very fundamental aspect of the Buddhist teachings. All things, all conditioned things are impermanent, unsatisfactory, and everything is anatta. But when you hear that without the background information, it can be very puzzling and even confusing and even frightening for some people. What? You mean you haven't got a self? Who's sitting here? Who's thinking? Who's feeling? I'm a ghost. So anyway, that's without the background information, it can be very confusing, in other words. So. But when I came across this phrase, IMaking, so you see there's a difference, isn't there? Instead of thinking about there's no self, the I is made up. So there is, the Buddha's actually saying, he's his I making. So the Buddha refers to an I, but it's not a permanent, absolute thing, because it's just made up. See, you get the point? Yeah, a little bit different than saying no self. It's like saying there's no I, which sounds ridiculous because, well, who's speaking then? Who's sitting? Who's feeling? But if it's made up, doesn't that kind of a little bit more, less frightening, isn't it? You aren't denied, you're just kind of artificial. So but so I was very interested in what this actually meant. You know, there's quite a few teachings about anatta, the various ways that Buddha approached the theme of anatta. You know, but when I tried to find out what he meant by I-making, then there was no information. Nothing was actually mentioned specifically about I-making or mind-making. There's some references to underlying disposition to conceit. Yeah, a few references to it, but I-making wasn't mentioned anywhere. What is it? But you know, if one investigates the Pali Canon, it is possible to tease out, you know, some of the meanings of this. One has to look at other words, identity, for example, Sakya Ditti. That's identity view, Sakya Ditti. But there's Sakya, which is identity. You know, so there's a few other, you know, different ways to approach it, to different references. And what's more important is in this context, these people are asking, how does I-making, mind-making, underlying disposition to conceit come to an end? Which is awakening. Isn't that interesting? Are you interested? So there's great possibilities there. But in order to do that, this requires that one investigates how I-making comes to be in the first place. Otherwise, I mean, the whole like just like in the Buddha's example of the Four Noble Truths. You know, if you want to resolve suffering, you have to investigate it to find out what the cause is before you can release the cause. But if you just think, oh, I can get rid of suffering by trying to conquer it, by trying to ignore it, by trying to suppress it, you never succeed. You have to study it. So the same thing, if you want to realize the cessation of I-making, we have to recognize really understand deeply what is the nature of I-making that we're trying to resolve, trying to realize cessation of. If you don't know what it is, you can't unravel it. So the first part of my book, I go into how I-making is created, how it's developed. And the second part, it goes into cessation. That'll be maybe October. See, we got August, September, October. So maybe August is the development of I-making. Anyway, I'll see how far I get anyway. But in the process, this is even needing to, you can say, go through a lot of the key aspects of the Buddha's teachings to, first of all, to understand how the Buddha explained this, because the Buddha wasn't familiar with modern psychology. I mean, you can read about books about modern psychology, and there is books on, the development of the self, psychological development of the self. But the Buddha had a particular language he used. So the next week, I'll go get through the background of the conditions in the Buddha's time, because the Buddha had to use a language at that time, 5th century BC India, and he grew up in a cultural context. And just like we grew up in a cultural context. So like, for example, when we hear non-self, it's quite frightening, because we're very familiar, our society is very self-orientated. We're very personality-orientated, self-orientated, and maybe even more these days with so much these social media and things. Everybody has their profile. I don't. You can check out, maybe I better do it, check out my name on the internet and see what they got about me. What they got me pegged as. Maybe it's just blank. I tried to find my niece was a judo competitor. I think it was judo. A junior judo competitor in championships in Canada, and she went to some kind of important meet, and I didn't hear how she did. So I was going to look her up, and she has the same last name as me. You see, same family, niece, right? But she's my brother's daughter. You see, so I checked up her name, and I couldn't find anything about it anyway. But then I thought, how about to do my name? Is that sweet? I don't know if it's sweet or conceit.
Being honest about the conceit.
Yes, yeah. Well, one thing I thought of was, I had all these friends at high school, but then we moved away, and I changed my name. So how would they ever find me if they wanted to, Anyway, and I found out there was somebody with my name, a famous poet in Canada. And I thought, they haven't published my work, have they? My poems weren't that good. And I thought I kind of burned them. But no, I stored them away in my sister's house or something. But but it's a bit odd when you have several names. You see, I can kind of play different personalities. So I can actually play the anatta game. I refer to something called the anatta shuffle. That's when people they read something about the Buddhist teachings, and then very high-minded about it. Oh yes, I'm not myself, And then if you try and pin them down and say, you did that, Say, no, it's not self anyway, not self. And then they very strongly defend themselves. You accuse me of doing that. My non-self did that, so you can't accuse me of it. That's when people think about it too much, you see. And one time Ajahn Chah said, if you think about anatta too much, your head will explode. Because your thinking is also part of yourself, another aspect of yourself. So you're thinking about yourself, thinking about your not self. But if you see it, and maybe begin to see it in terms of I-making, self-making, then you recognize, okay, there's different forms the self takes then. It's made in different ways, you see. But it requires a little bit of flexibility of mind, and understanding something about the basic Buddhist teachings to help to get a perspective on it. So this theme, I divided it into the first part, developing IMaking, how IMaking is developed. I divide, just for the sake of trying to explain it, into 4 different categories. Of course, in reality, it's not 4 separate categories. It's not like, I guess you can say like some people divide a human life. There's childhood, and then there's youth, and then there's, what comes next? Adolescence or something, or and then there's young adult, middle age, mature, old age, ancient, prehistoric. I don't know what's that. Very mature, overripe. But of course, it's one continuous life, isn't it? It's not that there's some people who are physically they might be middle age, but emotionally they're still children, or vice versa. There was somebody who was did some psychology work, psychological work, grief work with families that lost young children. And we usually think, I thought anyway, that when a young child dies, it's really tragedy. A child hardly has hardly has had a chance of life. But this man said, not so. He said, there's some of the children, they are so wise in their 10 years, 5 years, 10 years in the world. They've learned so much in 10 years that they learn more than people who are 80 years old, who are still got the brain of a child. So he said, you can't count it by physical age. And some of the children had to, they lived through, you could say very painful illnesses, for example. They had, at crisis, they really had to learn a lot about life. And some of them were already ready to go then. Yeah, I've learned enough this lifetime, Time to get recycled, or whatever their belief was. But just for the sake of trying to explain it, the IMaking process is divided into 4 different categories. Get into more detail later as I go through the different stages. There's particular references and particular modes of relating to at different stages. Like the first one is the Anusayah, underlying disposition to conceit, because it's very, very fundamental. I would say maybe you could even say it's probably the closest the Buddha would ever come to an instinct. It's so fundamental to our being. But the trouble is, one of the kind of conundrums is, because it is so fundamental to our being, unless we're aware of it, it takes us over. It's guiding us. So unless you're aware that there is that tendency there, it just keeps compounding, being compounded. You just keep thinking all the time, I. And then if you happen to recognize what this tendency is, first of all, just having it pointed out to us, there is this underlying tendency there. It's like a compulsion. Yeah. You say, or just like somebody points out to you, why do you always reach for the sugar all the time? Like, I didn't even notice that. It was just so common to your way of being, you just automatic reflex. When it's pointed out to you, and you say, yeah, that's a good point. I'll be more mindful of that. So just by having the Buddha recognize or point out to us, this underlying disposition to conceit, then maybe you can become more conscious of it, more mindful of that tendency. You know, when you hear somebody talking, say, "Oh, they're talking about me." You know, are they? I mean, who cares about you except yourself? You know? I mean, okay, no, it's not that bad, but no. Somebody else loves you, I'm sure, but no, but automatically we just reference ourselves. You know, why is this wind blowing on me? You know? Why is the sun shining on me? But when you have that pointed out to us anyway, we can recognize that tendency and, we don't have to buy into it. And the more aware we are of it, more mindful we are of it, the less we can maybe compound it. We don't keep feeding it all the time. But this is only, this is information, first of all. Once we have the understanding, the information, then we still need to do something about it, do the practice. So as I mentioned, for example, being aware, trying to be more aware of the underlying disposition to conceit. First of all, we got to understand what conceit is. Generally speaking, when you say self-referencing, it doesn't mean necessarily that I'm just full of myself, even though I am. But I try to be modestly. I'm so modest about my conceit. I don't wear it on my shoulder. But to bring more mindfulness to it, requires development of mindfulness. And developing, say, for example, the conceits we have to do with the body, feelings. We come around to what's called the 5 groups of grasping, the 5 khandhas. Body, feelings, you can say recognition, I translate recognizing, which is, you can say, which is sanya. And then there's sankhara, which is the main factor. It's mental activities, the main factor being volition or will. Then there is consciousness, vijnana. But I have my own translation of these. That'll be the whole hour talk probably. Trying to explain why I translate them, how I do translate them. But for many people, we aren't that familiar with our conditions of mind. And if you were to ask somebody, can you differentiate between feeling and perception, for example? Most people wouldn't know what you were talking about. Perception, feeling, feeling. Oh, well, I feel happy. That's not a feeling. That's an emotion. So the Buddha, there's quite a few teachings pointing out the value of being aware of these particular conditions of mind, the body sensations, and these states of mind or mental phenomena, perception, sankharas, feeling, perception, sankharas, which is mental activities and consciousness. And to be able to do that, we have to use Buddha's language again. In India, these were pretty, I think, well known because they aren't very well explained in the Pali Canon. They're not really explicitly explained. So, which to me points out that they're well known in the Buddha's time. And Buddha perhaps even borrowed them from other religions, probably Brahmanism. But it's like somebody, the title of some book by one of the Western scholar monks, Analayo. He talked about titles of one of his books is Entering the Thought World of the Pali Canon. So it's a way of looking at reality. If you read the Pali Canon, it's a particular way the Buddha, you can say the Buddha was looking at reality. So in order to really understand what the Buddha was saying, we have to kind of go into that space, try and look at it from the point of view of the Buddha in 5th century AD India, 5th century BC India. So good luck. It's going to be a brain twister, maybe.
May I ask a question there? The 5 aggregates, wasn't that what he really found out? So how can we say that he got it from, because that was what he really understood, that these 5 aggregates, the nature of these 5 aggregates. So I doubt if that language was I'm not trying to say Buddhism is supreme or anything, but that was his teaching.
Well, I would say that, those teachings were around, the 5 aggregates, but they weren't understood correctly. Because the Buddha understood them as anicca, dukkha, anatta. That's where he got enlightened, where at that time people understood them. Their understanding of these 5 aggregates was, these are permanent, fixed. These are this either one of them must be the self. The self, a permanent self, is consciousness, is feeling. There was some of these wandering ascetics, they thought that feeling was the self, the ultimate self. Feeling is always present. Others, it was consciousness is always present.
That's why they torture themselves the way they practice extreme.
Yeah.
Because
The body is their real self, or something or other, or it has a physical aspect to it, And if they kind of cause it to suffer, they can purify it or something. They can taste out all the kind of coarse elements of it, and it's purified, and then it floats up to nirvana somewhere. There are lots of lots of ideas. We say weird, but I say weird, but to them that was how they saw things. If they came this today and asked us how we see things, they think they're pretty weird too in the 21st century there. They believe this internet stuff talks to us. Internet talk and send vibrations to you and whatever. 5G rots your brain and but the trying to understand this process of I-making, mind-making, underlying disposition to conceit. First of all, to me it was quite a revelation in the sense of, when we look at it that way, the Buddha's teaching on anatta, then it doesn't deny the self. If you translate it, you'd say translate anatta to literally, not self, non-self. To me, it sounds like a denial of self. So that's where people get confused. But it's not a denial of self. What the Buddha was denying was that there's a permanent self. But that's, if you just translate literally as not self, non-self, you forget the permanent part. And it's like denying yourself altogether. And even some Buddhists understand, to get enlightened, I have to get rid of myself. Well, I hate to disappoint you, but there's no self there to begin with. Really. And you try and do that, you compound the self. I'm trying to get rid of myself. So there's a bigger I there, or another I trying to get rid of my I. And then I trying to get rid of the I that gets trying to get rid of the I, trying to get rid of the I. And but if you can look at it in the point of view of it's a made-up process, well, you can recognize, there is one form of I, of self, but through development of spiritual exercises, you can develop, if you like, a spiritual I, a better I, if you like, a more religious I, a more spiritual I, which when you can recognize what that actually is, it's a more rarefied. Just like for example, when I talk about keeping the precepts, I would say that when people break the precepts, they go against the principle of the precepts, it really is self-reinforcing. Like killing somebody is the ultimate ego trip, isn't it? I deny you of life. Huh? Is that the ultimate ego trip? But to have to allow somebody to exist, even though they are terribly annoying, they disagree with you, they're totally wrong, they're all the rest, fill in the blanks, They deserve to die even, but you refrain from it. You have to, it's really self-surrender, isn't it? You really have to surrender yourself, your whole identity, which I hold on to my values. I'm absolutely right and they're absolutely wrong. But allow them to live. You really have to let down your guard. You have to be really self-surrendering, and say, okay, you're a so-called blah, 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 but I'm so compassionate that I'll let you I'll let you live. Because I'm so enlightened or whatever, I'm so compassionate, so advanced in spiritually, but it does, you just can't just say that, can you? You can say it all you want, but unless you really feel it in your heart, you still wouldn't really work very well, would it? You kill them in your mind, maybe, yeah? You still kill them in your mind. They can pick up the vibes. Maybe they give a heart attack by picking up your negative vibes and say, you should die, but I'll let you live. So to really do that, you have to really surrender yourself. It requires more than just a good idea, noble thoughts. It requires deep practice. There needs to be really nobody there, ultimately. No more self-making. And even, if you keep thinking that way about yourself and they're wrong and I'm right and all, then you just compound yourself again. And then you're digging yourself a bigger grave, if you like, or a bigger pit of negative habits, more sankharas, negative habits, and it'll be harder to let go of them. So, when we try and follow the precepts, for example, just trying to be a moral person, it's refraining from killing, refraining from these negative things, stealing. I'm taking your things for me. No, I won't do that anymore. I won't exploit you sexually. And I won't corrupt the truth by lying to you so that I feel myself more wise or something or other. So, these are, just being able to keep the precepts requires a certain degree of selflessness, if you like. That's why, for some of the extreme examples of breaking the precepts, for example, killing your mother and father, then if you do that, you cannot be ordained as a monk. Your morality is so beyond the pale that you are, in this lifetime anyway, you're unsalvageable. You can't be enlightened. So the Buddha said, well, that's too much. You must have such really extreme negative emotions that no use trying to be a monk or a nun and try and be enlightened, because it's not going to work. Come back next lifetime. Try again next lifetime. So some of the basic teachings about morality, generosity too. Generosity is one of the biggest ways to, most helpful ways to develop selflessness. Giving up. I mean, of course, it gets a little bit distorted sometime, because some people, they look upon it as, if I'm generous, I get my ticket to heaven, you see. Some people, I remember once being at this monastery at a branch of Ajahn Wat Papong, and the abbot went away somewhere, and I got stuck being the senior monk, even though just a visitor there. I didn't know anything about the place, really. I was just a visitor, but anyway, he left me there, and so the next day, this group of people turned up to offer the meal, and they offered made special offerings. There was a Buddha image, a bit garish, with all kinds of sequins on it and stuff, kind of plastic with all kinds of sequins on it. And then there was a bowl, a bucket with the eels or fish in it. Then there was a robe and, toothpaste and towels and things. And so sometimes they bring these things, so okay. So I received it and gave the blessing, and then the next day, another group of people came with exactly the same thing. Thought, hey, there's a pattern here and there. I remember seeing in the sala lots of these Buddhas with sequins on them. Anyway, so when the abbot came back, I said, "Was there something going on here with this?" He says, "Well, there is a lady in Ubon, I think she's a hairdresser or something, who claims to be able to see ghosts. And these people women come in to get their hair done. They see a ghost following them, you see. And it was the unborn child. They apparently had abortions, and the young child was following them around, you see. And so she said, do you go to the temple? I said, not really. So maybe you should go there and be generous, and in the name of your deceased child. How did you know about that? So then she told him, go to this temple, and take a Buddha image and some fish and so I guess there's quite a few people. And they all went there and gave the same thing, and at least the fish, they buy fish in the market, you see, live fish. Then they would release them in the river. It's right next to the river, right next to the Moon River. So it was quite good for the fish anyway. They got freed to be caught downstream again by somebody else, brought back to the market. But I mean, it was in one sense it was making merit. They're coming to make this offering to the monastery in the name of their deceased child, But it was sort of like formalized, When they do this, offer these certain things, then they'll get, get the child get reborn in whatever it is, or their karma will be released or something other, or whatever it is, And then some people even measure, how much generosity you give, what level of heaven you get to, There's some of the monasteries in Thailand. They put a kind of I think they put a label on. If you give 1,000 baht, you get to the lower heaven, and if you give 2,000 baht, you get to the next level, and 1,000,000 baht, you get to the Brahmaloka, or something or other. Interested? Everything. You have to give your life. Give your whole self. Yeah, you have to give yourself. Give up yourself. But some people, they follow, I would say, they follow the basic religious teachings, and maybe sometimes they get corrupted. Maybe sometimes it's skillful means, perhaps. Some people wouldn't make an offering unless they thought that by making this offering, then they'll, go to heaven, or they'll get a better rebirth, or they'll get over their illness or something, or cure their anxieties or something, and and just maybe that positive thinking may help them. They offer like when I was in Switzerland, somebody came and they offered this. What do they offer? They offer some clothes, lay people's clothes, even cigarettes. And I said, why are they offering lay clothes to monks? Well, they believe that if they offer the lay clothes, they'll have clothes in their life, next life. You see, they'll never be without clothes. They'll always have clothes. They'll always have medicine. They'll always have cigarettes. I don't know if they are allowed cigarettes in heaven. Oh, yeah. I thought they live in ambrosia, don't they? They don't need anything. They don't even have a body, so they don't even need clothes. But better not tell them that, because we won't get any robes then, will we? But I mean, just the process. Once you know what the process is, what it's the real underlying process is, generosity, giving up, letting go of these possessions, surrendering your sense of self, which is identified. This is what mind making is. You make up your sense of mine. This is my robe, my new robe. This is my. Don't anybody take it. This is my new robe. No. So there's mind making there, right? Yeah. And I mean, I don't really, until my hut burned down, I didn't really know I was attached to things. Yes. Until it was gone. My favorite beanie and my favorite socks, and they were there all the time, But I got so used to them, and then when they're gone, I sort of yeah. So I don't know if it was a blessing or not, because that it made me. Well, I was more conscious of being attached to them, but I'm still attached to them. So, I still always think of it, don't I? So, but in the kind of theory of things, I mean, it wasn't as much attachment as just convenience. The hat fit very well, and it was the right color, and that's why I rationalize it anyway. It takes a while to get things that are just suit this particular body, for example, right? Yeah, it's like finding the right book to read or something. It's maybe you have to search through a whole bunch of stuff to find out what the right one you need, which is the one I need at this time. Just like researching this book, I had to go and look through different books and things to find out where was that information or something. So it takes a lot of work, and then when you find it, aha, right, I'll keep that book then, But hopefully, by looking at this particular phrase anyway, I-making, mind-making, underlying disposition to conceit, we get some better understanding of what the Buddha was talking about in the whole teaching of anatta, no permanent self. Again, there is the theory part of it, and then there is the practice part. And because this underlying disposition of conceit, for example, is so deep-rooted, it's not a matter of just rationalizing it away. You have to be able to notice it, to see it. It kind of infiltrates all of our perceptions. When you're looking around, when you're hearing, immediately there's that reference to I. I am hearing, I am seeing. Yeah. And when you understand that, then maybe you can just abide with, there is sound. There is sight. There's a sight. I'm looking at this wall here. So I see the wall, and I can start thinking about the wall if I want. What gray again? Familiar thinking. Or I can recognize, this is just a sight. And then it can trigger off certain thoughts in the mind, recognition, trigger off some memories, associations, and then the thinking can start. And that's skillful thinking, for example. Yeah, I prefer to look out at the green myself personally. So you recognize, okay, what's this doing to my mind then? Huh? And recognize, is this skillful, this unskillful? It's having an effect upon the mind. Is it worth, indulging that sight, if you like, allowing those thoughts to go on, those associations? Or I can change it. But if you don't even know that's happening, you aren't even aware of it, it's going on automatically in the background, unconsciously, and you find yourself in a terrible mood after a while. Gray again. Just like the weather in England. Or look out at the green and oh yes, there's some tea trees out there, just like the forests in Wellington, New Zealand, and and more cheerful and so. And then you recognize, you can go beyond that and recognize, this is just conditioned. It's just all conditioned processes. You can recognize that maybe it's sometimes in your life it's helpful to have more skillful states of mind or more skillful impressions. But other times you recognize, that's still an impression. It still has an influence on the mind. See? Okay, it's a cheerful one, it's a helpful one, and more skillful, yes, but it's still an activity of mind, and and I like pleasant thoughts. I like skillful thoughts. There's another identification, right? Maybe a little bit more subtle level of identification, but you can recognize, still identification. So, it's still limitation, still limited. It's still impermanent, ultimately imperfect, and you have no control over it, or little control over it. So better to recognize and let that go too. But usually this requires, say, stages of development in meditation, or spiritual practice, if you like. But so first of all, we get some understanding, at least some theory behind it, understanding how the Buddha was approaching this theme, and then using some of these themes the Buddha referred to investigate ourselves, find out. Rather than just, worship the Buddha as an enlightened being, the Buddha gave us the teaching to guide us there ourselves for direct experience. So to be a student of the Buddha, disciple, better to follow what he's saying rather than just try and imitate him artificially. So anyway, this theme is a very deep one. So hopefully it has some meaning for you. Guess we'll find out after a while. And so far, recognize, if you just bring up that thought in your mind sometimes, that phrase sometimes, IMaking, mind-making. Where's that happening? Can I see that happening? Underlying disposition to conceit. The disposition, the tendency to always refer to self-referencing. Perhaps you can become aware of it then, just happening automatically. The Buddha didn't make up these things. He didn't make up eye-making, didn't make up underlying disposition to conceit. He became aware of it. He became awake to it, enlightened to it, as it were. And he points it out to us to help us also see it. So hopefully that you become a little bit more aware of it. Eye-making, mind-making, underlying disposition to conceit. And take that as you can say a theme for your meditation sometimes. Don't think about it too much. Just try and observe the process as it's happening. So until next time.